Hey class, today we're going to talk about some matrix operations. A matrix is just a rectangular array of numbers that we can use to kind of simplify some adding or subtracting of lots of numbers in a big data set that we have. So just a few basic operations that we're going to talk about today. The first thing is just identifying the dimensions of a matrix. So dimensions are always going to be listed as the rows, the number of rows that we have, by the number of columns that we have. So it's always going to be the rows and then the columns. So if you look here at example number 1, you look across here, these are my rows, and we look down here, these are my columns. So I have 2 rows, 1 column. So this is a 2 by 1 matrix. All right, similarly here, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 rows, and then 1, 2, 3. So this is a 4 by 3 matrix. And then the last one, we have 1 row, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. So this is a 1 by 4 matrix. So that was how we identified the dimensions. After we identify the dimensions, we want to then add or subtract. So adding matrices and subtracting both have the same rule. We have to have the same dimensions. So they have to be the same dimensions in order to add them. So we've got 2 matrices here. This is a 2 by 2 matrix, and this is a 2 by 2 matrix. So since we have a 2 by 2 matrix and a 2 by 2 matrix, we can add them. So all you're going to do to add is just you're going to take the corresponding cells and you're going to add the corresponding cells. So if I have 2, I'm going to add it to the -3, and that's going to be in the top. So the top left is going to end up in the top left. So that's going to be -1. Okay, then we have 5 plus -1. That's going to give us 4. The -3 plus 0, -3, and 4 plus 2 is going to give us 6. So our resultant matrix after we add is going to be -1, 4, -3, and 6 just from adding. So 2 plus -3 is -1, -3 plus 0 is going to be that -3, 5 plus -1 is going to be that 4, 4 plus 2 is going to give us that 6. So that's adding. Subtracting works the same way. So subtracting 2 matrices, we have to have the same dimensions just like we did for adding, but this time all we're going to do is subtract. So we're going to take this first matrix, subtract the ones that are over here. So same thing, I'm going to take 9, I subtract 0, that's going to give me 9. I got -12 minus 4, that's going to give me -16. I got 11 minus a -3. Whenever we subtract a negative, it becomes positive, so that's going to be a positive 14. -3 minus 2, that's going to give me -5. So whenever we subtract, we just subtract the corresponding elements, just like we did with adding. Next, we're going to talk about scalar multiplication. So scalar is very similar to scale. So basically all we're doing is we're taking this number that's out front and we're going to distribute it throughout the matrix. So our matrix here is a 2 by 2 matrix. All we're going to do is just take each of those numbers and multiply them by 4. So it's going to make it bigger. Here we have a fraction. It's going to make everything smaller, but we're scaling it up or scaling it down based on the scalar multiplication. So here, if I were to multiply these, 4 times 2 gives me 8. 4 times -3 gives me -12. 4 times -4 is -16. And 4 times 5 is going to be 20. All right, so that's scalar multiplication. Here, I do the same thing. I'm going to just multiply everything times a half. So basically I'm just taking half of everything. So that's -10, 5, 0, and 1. But all you're doing with that scalar multiplication is basically the distributive property. And the last one we're going to talk about, our last example, is going to kind of just combine everything. So we have this. I'm going to subtract these 2 matrices. I notice that they're both the same dimensions. So all I'm going to do here is do my scalar multiplication first, and then I'm going to subtract my 2 matrices. So go ahead and distribute this 3 throughout here. So that's going to be 3, 0, -3, 12, -9, 6, and then I'm still gonna leave that subtraction there, and I'm gonna distribute this 2 throughout here, so that's -6, -2, 0, 10, -12, and 18. Alright, so I took care of the scalar multiplication. Now all I'm going to do is just subtract. So I got 3 minus -6. So that's going to combine to give me a 9. And then 0 minus -2, so that's going to be a +2. -3 minus 0 is going to be -3. 12 minus 10, that's going to be 2. -9 minus -12, -12, that becomes positive. So that's going to be a +3, and then 6 minus 18, that's going to be a -12. And that is how you would do that one. So we multiply the scalar multiplication first, and then we subtract or add depending on what operation it has in between the two matrices.